Welcome to tonight's live stream. I am going to get started in a minute. I just need to get stuff ready for tonight's show. Awesome, Gordon. Glad to hear you're watching me from an Xbox. That's one of the cool things about YouTube. You can watch somebody from a smartphone, you can watch them from your TV, and you can watch them from your gaming console. That's one of the cool things. You can watch a show from any platform, and that's one of the reasons why I like doing these live streams because viewers can see me on multiple different platforms. So before I get started, I'm gonna go into a little bit of perfunctory as related to the usual stuff. And I'm going to first give everybody a quick progress report on the upcoming John Haynes at Death's Door comic. This week, we reached a milestone. Antonio Balderi, the artist who is doing the art and doing a fantastic job on the art for the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, has done the 16th page of 32. So we are at the halfway mark as related to the art. And I wouldn't have been able to get to this milestone without Antonio doing all of that fantastic work and all of the support from all of you great viewers who have gone out and donated to the Patreon, the PayPal, and the Cash App. And if it wasn't for one viewer in particular giving me a large donation, I wouldn't have been able to get this project off the ground. So I really want to thank that viewer for helping me to get this far as related to the comic. And they also paid for the cover for the book for Isis Revenge of the Cyber Goddess and the pinup that was in it. So I really want to thank that viewer because I really have a lot of great gratitude for them for helping me get the SJS Direct imprint to this point. And again, we are at the 50% point as related to the art. And once we get to 100%, I can take the art to the letterer and I can launch the Kickstarter for the comic. And this comic, again, is coming along very beautifully. And I'm hoping to get it to you guys sooner rather than later on Kickstarter. Now, in addition to that perfunctory, I'm going to talk about some of the upcoming books on the SJS Direct imprint. And what's coming out this month is the latest book in the Simp series, Stop Simping in Cyberspace. And this book currently is available on Amazon.com in paperback right now. So if you want to get a head start and get your copy of Stop Simping in Cyberspace before the official release date, you can put in your order right now by clicking this up link in the description box. Not the description box, but in the chat. I'm going to drop this link in the chat for Stop Simping in Cyberspace, and everybody will be able to go out here and pick up Stop Simping in Cyberspace in paperback, and you can pre-order the Kindle, which is coming on October 25th. Before I go into the second book, I'm going to give a shout out to some of the viewers. Gordon, glad to see you here. Gwood78, glad to see you here. The Kang, what's up? Neil Star, everything's going good. So I'm, again, talking about Stop Simping in Cyberspace first. And again, you guys can pick this book up on Amazon in paperback right now or pre-order your copy on Kindle. We are currently at 13 pre-orders and 3 sales. So I'm trying to get to 20 sales on this book. So I'm asking everybody to step up and pick up one of this book in the Simp series. Glad to see you here, Mobar7170. Awesome. Just glad to see you here. Now I'm going to talk about the other book that's coming out in November. That book is E-Steam Cancel Vacation. And E-Steam Cancel Vacation is my commentary on cancel culture. And in this book, Hell's Aspiring Angel takes on a social justice social media mob that's looking to cancel her. And you can get this book on Amazon.com in paperback right now. And you can get this book on Kindle on November 19th. So you will be able to get Cancel Vacation by clicking this link to Cancel Vacation. I'm going to put it up right now. And you'll be able to pick up Cancel Vacation on Amazon right now in paperback, and you can get the Kindle version on November 19th. So you can pre-order the Cancel Vacation in Kindle and get the paperback right now. And with all of that perfunctory done as related to your SJS direct publications, I'm going to get into tonight's topic. Now, tonight's topic is based on an article that was presented in Time magazine. And this article is one that I just have some issue with because it comes from an extremely gynocentric perspective. Now, in this Time magazine article, which you guys, I'm going to leave a link for you guys to go and check this article out. And this article, it talks about how there are more men than women who are likely to be single. And this article really comes from an extremely, as I see it, gynocentric perspective. And it's clear to me that the person who wrote this article never read books like I have written, like The Man Crisis or Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Because this article, it talks about how there are so many men that are single these days, and it doesn't really give us anything from a male perspective. Now, as I was reading this article, it just, again, it did not come from many of the men that I have heard from throughout many of the communities. And again, this is written by a woman, Belinda Luscombe, and clearly she did not take a minute to sit down and interview any of these men who are out here like myself, who are dealing with many of these issues. Now, the article starts out talking about, again, how men are more likely to be single than women, but this is something that does not fit logic. And the reason why I say it doesn't fit logic is because when you look at the world population, there are more women in the world than there are men. Now, according to statistics, there are 4 women in the world for every 1 man. And in some cases, when it comes to Black men, there are 7 women for every 1 man. So she's coming from a talking point saying, oh, men are now more likely to be single than women, when that's not the case at all. I mean, this is something that I can easily refute by just going to the research I did for my own book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. And I'll leave a link to that book. Glad to see you here, computer robots. And in Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, I talk about how there are more women than men. And I also talk about it in The Man Crisis as well. I mean, there are more women on the earth than men. And that is the way it has always been. There have always been more women than men. So this argument that this female writer is proposing, it doesn't make any logical sense when you just look at things like the census and you just look at the global population. So she's presenting this and saying, oh, now more men are likely to be single than women, and it's not a good sign. But the reason why so many men are single has to do with things that women went out here and demanded over 50 to 60 years ago. Now, the reason why so many men today are single is because of the feminist movement and many of the policies that were implemented as government went out of its way to cater to feminists. Now, you have to separate your feminist from your women because women have a completely different mindset than a feminist. So your feminists went out here and they wanted to be empowered, and the government gave them all of this power. So they're sitting there talking about, oh, why are all of these men single? Well, all of these men are single because they basically these days have no incentive to be in any relationship with a woman these days, because any attempt to have a relationship with a woman will lead to them wanting to have to deal with being punished by the gynocentric system. Now, in this article, what Ms. Luscombe talks about, almost a third of adult single men live with a parent. That's the first line in her article's introduction. And there's a reason why so many men are living with a parent. And that is because many men out here cannot find a way to get jobs that will allow them to start to build their life up. Now, before the feminist movement, a man at 18 years old, fresh out of high school, he could go and find himself a job someplace making a decent salary, and he could go out here and start to get started in doing things like getting his own apartment and doing things like starting his life. But in the time that I grew up, it was very difficult for a young man like myself. I remember coming out of college in 1994, and I wanted to get my life started, and it was next to impossible to get your life started, because back in the 60s and the 70s and even the early 80s, a guy with a high school diploma, he could just walk in someplace, go out here, get himself one of these jobs at a place like a GM plant, or even one of these little offices out here, and he was making a good $300 to $500 a week. And with $300 to $500 a week, a guy could go out here and start laying the foundation for starting his life. After a couple of months of living with his parents, he could go out here and get himself an apartment that's all his own. It might just be a studio or a one bedroom, but he could go out here and get himself started and be able to have a place and be able to go back and forth to work. But a guy in 1994 with a college degree, what he ran into was a lot of resistance from your feminists, your baby boomers, and many others. And they started raising the bar as related to their so-called standards. And they would sit there and insist that, one, a guy with a high school diploma was not enough. Two, a guy needed to have a college degree. And then on top of it, the college degree just wasn't enough. No, he had to have work experience. So it became almost impossible for a guy to go out here and get started like a guy did in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, where, again, high school diploma, you walked into a GM plant on one morning, the afternoon you were working, and you were working for a very nice wage. And this is how a guy could go out here and start making plans to move out of his parents' house in less than 3 to 6 months. But after you're in your 90s, we got all these crazy requirements: college degree, work experience. And again, this is for a job that paid what, $20,000 a year at the time. And people were giving guys like me a hard time back then. And you're wondering why guys are living with their parents. It was the reason why a lot of guys are living with their parents is because it's next to impossible for them to meet this extremely unrealistic and completely insane criteria that many employers set up. And many of these employers, while they were putting all of these crazy criteria out here, yes, you had a lot of females who would go out here and get these jobs, but but they had preference to do that because many of these companies were getting all sorts of government benefits to hire women over men. So it became very hard for a guy to go out here and get started in the job market, even if he had a college degree. So a lot of these people out here, they're sitting there wondering, oh, why is that guy living with his parents? But a lot of guys had to live with a parent because it was just next to impossible for them to get started. Now, the second sentence in the article again relates to this, and it says single men are much more likely to be unemployed, financially fragile, and to lack a college degree than those with a partner. Well, as a single man with a college degree, I can tell you why so many men are unemployed. And that again has to do with the very extremely gynocentric job market, where basically a lot of men run into a lot of discrimination. Now, I myself have run into this discrimination. I remember going to these hiring pools at the City University of New York, and they basically had female-owned group preference because the female HR people basically went out here and hired women because many of these women had this narrative talking about how women were so oppressed and how so many women needed these jobs over men. And they would use this to deny many men, especially heterosexual black men, opportunities at employment. And they're sitting there saying, oh, why are so many of these men unemployed? Well, when many of these men, like myself, go out here looking for work, oftentimes we are looked at with a lot of contempt. And a lot of employers don't want to go out here and give many men an opportunity to go out here and start building their careers because they want to say, oh, the women are oppressed, so the women need the jobs more than the men. And when you do this, what you're doing is you're keeping many men from getting their lives started. And that's the reason why so many of these men out here are financially fragile right now, because oftentimes they enter a job market that is gynocentric. They enter a job market that oftentimes does not go out of its way to support men in trying to get their lives started. And this happens, again, it was happening to me with a college degree. And a lot of men these days, they're not seeing a value in these college degrees because when they look at a lot of these college degrees, they're not seeing a return on the investment. Because after I graduated in 94, I started to see more and more men, walking away from a lot of the college system because they look at these degrees and they're saying, look, this degree, I spent over 6 figures on this degree, yet I cannot even get a minimum wage job inside of a fast food place. And I have applied at fast food places, even though I have a college degree. So I know how hard it is to get one of these jobs. And again, men, you're sitting there talking about why these men are, out here frustrated and stuff, and why they're out here struggling. Well, that's the reason why nobody wants to give many of these men out here that chance to get their life started, because we have this narrative out here that women are so oppressed and we need to give women opportunities. And then we have other narratives talking about, oh, the man is not going to be able to take care of his family, or he's not willing to take care of his family, and the woman needs the job. So the women get the job, and that's what leads to another point in the article early in the introduction, where she says, "Oh, single men earn less in 2019 than 1990, adjusting for inflation," and that is what because women were given many of the jobs in the job market, and your women are a majority of the workers in the job market. Because she goes on later on to say, single women, meantime, earn the same as they did 30 years ago, but those with partners have increased their earnings by 30%. But she probably doesn't tell you that the marriage rate in this country has has really dipped. So there aren't that many women out here with partners, but those single women, they're earning the same because those women control the human resource department. Those women control most of the hiring apparatus, and those women go out of their way to be extremely disrespectful to many of the men out here. Now, I recently today had a phone interview with a female for a job, and the female, she was just disrespectful from minute one. Now, I asked to be scheduled to talk to this person at 2 o'clock, but they call me at 3 o'clock. And then after calling me at 3 o'clock, they want to sit there and talk about how they wanted me to. I told them I wasn't available on Fridays and weekends, but they want to talk about, oh, we need somebody for Fridays and weekends. Well, the critical question I have to ask is, if you see that I have certain standards on my on my application, why are you calling me? And I have to ask again, why are you calling me late? Just basically not showing me any sort of professional courtesy or professional respect. And they also wanted to lowball me on the starting salary. So I basically had to just walk away from that whole phone interview and just move on. But this is the type of rudeness and disrespect men receive in the job market. People who don't really respect you to call you when you set up a time, and then people who don't even take a minute to really even read the application and see that the criteria I'm proposing, this is what I have to offer, and this is the terms that I'm looking for. I mean, showing me absolutely no professional courtesy or professional respect. And again, this is something a lot of females do in the job market to men. And then they wonder, oh, why are the men out here living with their parents, financially fragile and struggling? But that's because they get no support in the job market, which is so gynocentric and is just believing a lot of really outdated and archaic narratives about oppressed women. Because when you look at the statistics, women today are a majority of the workers in today's job market. And again, they control the hiring and firing of people in the workplace. And because they believe in these feminist narratives that, oh, they're so oppressed and men are doing them so bad, they go out of their way to deny men access to the job market. Now, this article continues to go on talking about how there's a growing gap between those who live with a partner and those who do not. And again, this is all focusing on gynocentric viewpoints as related to why so many men are single. And all of it focuses on this whole concept of college degrees and looking for these educated men. And this is coming from the narratives of your Madison Avenue and Hollywood, which sells women the fantasy, oh, this guy with the college degree is the ideal for success. So they like to go out here and push this guy who is this ideal of having the college degree and making the big money. And all of this really in the article is talking really about is women's fear of not being able to pick their fantasy man, this guy with the college degree, this guy who's making the six figures, this guy who is what people call the high value man. And a lot of these women are really scared they're not going to be able to get a partner. And the reason why they're not going to get a partner is not because of the men, it is because of themselves. They have really, again, being gatekeepers out here, kept all of the men from being able to access the job market, being able to access their ability to start making a living. And prevented those men from being able to go out here and be the higher wage earners, because what they want to do is empower the women. And again, you empower the women at the expense of the men. And now you're looking for this ideal man, but this ideal man cannot be found because those men, like myself, when we were in our 20s, we could not get started because females were gatekeepers and kept those men out. And now they're looking for this Mr. Right to come along and be the partner for them. And that's why they're sitting there talking about, oh, there are so many single men out here. But really, it's all about the fear of the single woman not being able to find a man. Because as the article goes on, it says over the same time period, the fortunes of single people have fallen. And the study shows that the proportion of American adults who live with a significant other, be it a spouse or an unmarried partner, declined substantially. In 1990, about 71% of the folks from the age of 25 to 54 were considered their prime working years, had a partner they were married or lived with. In 2019, only 62% did. Well, there's a reason why so many people are not married or living together. And again, it goes back to the gynocentric system. And this gynocentric system does not give a man an incentive to go out here and either have a relationship or get married, because many men out here, there's no incentive for them to even have a girlfriend these days, because all it takes is one phone number from one of these females to 911, one of them dialing 911, and a man could possibly lose what little that he has, because all it takes is for her, because in this era of Me Too, all she has to do is make an allegation against a man, and that allegation is taken as truth. So if this man goes out here and gets involved with her, he could wind up losing his freedom, which is the most important intangible. And many men right now believe they have too much to lose to get involved with today's modern feminists out here. And I won't say woman, because a woman is a completely different being. Many men don't want to get involved with the feminist because it would lead to him getting locked up. And in some cases, after he gets locked up, he gets that felony on his record for things like domestic violence or assault. And that leads to that man not being able to get employment. It leads to that man not being able to go out here and be able to make a living for himself. So a lot of men have no real incentive to get involved with today's feminist, because today's feminist will punish them for anything arbitrary, like just leaving a toilet seat up or eating the last few flakes of cornflakes in the cereal box. So a guy has too much to lose, and that's why we're seeing many men not here even dating anymore. And a lot of men, they're not going out here and getting married because a man can lose practically everything, all because a female just decides to file for divorce. So a lot of guys back in the days of the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, they had a reason to go out here and get married, because there was no punishing system out here that would lead to this guy losing half of his income and assets in a community property state, where the woman can just take all of his assets and then put him on the hook for alimony so that she can maintain her so-called lifestyle. Meanwhile, he has to go out here and struggle while she takes most of his money and then spends it all on this lavish lifestyle that she says that she's used to. I mean, these divorce laws make it where many men just don't want to get married. And the Me Too trust and believe system that we're still under, even in spite of Bill Cosby's conviction being overturned, makes it even less of an incentive for a man to go out here and get married. Because why should a man go out here and get married? Because there's just too much for him out here. And again, he's going to get punished by these women who, again, 80% of the time file for divorce, or they look for some reason to go out here and make an allegation against a man. So you have many of these men out here, they have no reason to have relationships with women. And that's why a lot of these men are walking away, because they don't want to go out here and live with this woman, because an allegation of domestic violence or an allegation of something that she says he did can lead to him getting locked up and lead to him with a felony on his record, or he can wind up getting into a divorce situation where he can lose everything he worked for and built. And she can also go out here, get custody of his children, and teach them to hate him. So why should a man go out here and get involved with today's modern feminist? That's a critical question that this Time magazine article never really answers, because I'll further read the article. She says partly this is because people are taking longer to establish that relationship. That's a lie. No, men aren't looking to establish any relationship because the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. There's just too much headache with today's modern feminist. And that's why many men are not looking to establish any relationship with a woman, because they're afraid of being punished by the gynocentric state. Now, you're saying the median age of marriage is creeping up, and that's because the woman puts the career over marriage. Now, that's something that this woman did not do her research on, because she's saying, oh, the reason why the median age is creeping up, but the median age is creeping up because feminists told women that they could put off marriage and they could wait to marry later on. And that's something that feminists told women back in the 60s and the 70s. And I've heard many of them tell women, go get your college degree, go get this job, and you'll be in a better place to get a man. What they don't understand is the man that you're not going to find any men, because the pool of guys that she's used to getting when she's younger, that pool starts to dry up as she gets older. And once she starts to go into the job market and is working on this career and makes the career first, all of those guys start looking at other options for women. And those guys they just practically disappear by the time these women become 35, 40. And that's when they're not anybody a guy wants to go out here and get married to, because he's not able to start his family back when he was younger. A lot of guys, they want to go out here back again in the 60s and the 70s. They would get that job at the GM plant. They would get that job at the office, and they would go out here, start a skilled trade, or go out here and start to learn a business. And they would have their foundation. Again, they would have their little studio apartment, their one bedroom apartment, but it would be a base. And again, this would attract women, because the women would see that the guy was working towards becoming a provider. He was working towards building a life. And again, he was somebody who was looking like they're getting ready to start laying the foundation for generating some wealth, but they didn't really want to go out here. The feminists, they don't want to go out here and understand how these things work. They wanted to go out here and be the empowered woman in the job. And they're looking for this guy who's going to be making the big money. But young guys, when they start out, they don't make big money. It takes time for them to get there, but they can't get started because the female sees the guy at the bottom and she has no respect for him, not understanding guys have to start someplace, and it usually takes them about 2 to 3 years to just get started to the point where they can start laying that foundation towards really starting to do some serious building. I mean, when you get a guy who's about 18, 19, and he starts out and he's, again, got his first job, serious job, it's going to take him a while to get his money up. And guys, back in the 90s, it was hard for them to get their money up. And that's why we have a lot of guys struggling right now, because there's no way for them to get their money up. I mean, a lot of these jobs that are out here, they pay anywhere from minimum wage to maybe about $16, $17 an hour. And that the guys can't really get started with that kind of money, because when you look at that kind of money and adjust it for inflation, it's about maybe $6, $7 an hour in 1994 money. I mean, the guy from the 60s and the 70s, he was making $18 an hour starting, $20 an hour starting. That's about $36 an hour in American money right now, or about $40 in American dollars an hour now. And again, these guys could go rent apartments. These guys could buy brand new cars. And that made those guys look like assets to women. But today's guy doesn't look like an asset because he can't really get any sort of traction. Meanwhile, you have the female who has been given jobs and given money, and she's in a better place than the man. And we don't want to invest in the man. And then we're wondering why the men don't want to get married or have relationships. Well, they're not in an economic place where they can go out here and have those relationships, because nobody's thinking about how your relationships dynamics work. I mean, you're sitting here again, this in this article, they're saying, oh, that these guys are struggling. Well, you know, got to understand why these guys are struggling. Now, I'm reading the article further. They're talking about, oh, the median age of marriage is picking up, and while more people live together than before, that has not matched the numbers of people who are staying single, and that the number of older single people is much higher than it was in 1990. Well, the reason why there's a higher number of older single people is because of the divorce rate, and it's also due to a lot of people not being able to work with today's modern woman. A lot of men, they want to go out here and have relationships with women, but today's modern women is next to impossible to have a relationship with because of those feminist ideas in our mind and this feminist culture. Now, one of the reasons why women are having a hard time having relationships is due to this hypergamy. And this hypergamy is something that has her looking for these top tier guys. And as she gets these college degrees, she's looking for these kind of guys who are millionaires and billionaires, because she's making all of this big money at this job. But the whole thing is, those guys on that level are extremely rare. And those guys on that level, there's only a handful of them. I mean, that's what they call the 80-20 rule. There's just only a handful of these guys in the world. And they're going to go directly for those guys because they have more money and resources. But that's what happens when you don't invest in your men, because if you invested in your men like they did before feminism, you would have a lot of guys out here who would be pulling that big money, like those guys who used to work at the GM plants and many of these other jobs with a high school diploma. These guys were pulling six figures, and that made those guys appear extremely attractive to women. And that's one of the reasons why so many women were chasing guys, because they saw that these guys were coming out of places like, again, the GM plant, the military, and many other places. I mean, these guys were coming out with a high school diploma, making really nice money. So women, because they were in a larger population, they had to compete for the men. But when you have women out here with the resources, then the women don't have to compete for the men. And the men have no incentive to go out here and do anything, because they feel like they can't get any sort of opportunity, because the lists and criteria that are put up for many of these jobs become absolutely unrealistic and completely ridiculous. And that's when you really take a critical look at many of the jobs out here and the list that are as related to qualifications, and you compare it to the list of qualifications that women have for a man, you notice how they're both equally unrealistic, and both of them are equally as ridiculous. And again, that's all of our gynocentric system out here, because the females who run HR put the same unrealistic criteria for a job that they put out here for a man. And again, that makes it impossible for the man to go out here and compete. And they're sitting here thinking, oh, we can't find, all these guys are single. Well, all of those guys are single because they never got that start, and they never got anybody to invest in them in the beginning. So That's why so many guys, excuse me, I had a little gas, but so many guys out here are not really able to move themselves forward. I mean, guys out here want to do things, but you can't do things when there's what I call a HR brick wall, and a wall that keeps the guy from going out here and looking and being able to have relationships or get married. I mean, it's hard to get a start when you have the females out here being given everything. And how can a guy go out here and show that he has value to the woman if she already has everything given to her by corporate America and the state? That's a critical question I have to ask the writer of this article, who wants to again tell us that the men being single is a bad thing. Well, the men didn't want to be single. The men want to be the leader. The man wants to be the head. But in our gynocentric system, we make the woman the head. And as she's the head, she's looking for a man who's already established, like who's better than her. And she's not looking for a guy who's looking to build. So that's another reason why a lot of these women are sitting here talking about, oh, they can't find a man, and why so many men are single. And again, I'm going to read more of the article. She says, the trend has not had an equal impact on all sectors of society. The Pew study says that uses information from the 2019 American Community Survey. Notice that men are now more likely to be single than women, which was not the case 30 years ago. Black people are much more likely to be single, 59% than any other race, and Black women are the most likely to be single of any other sector. Well, the Black community was the most impacted by feminism, because the feminist movement went out here and attacked the Black community directly. And this is something I talk about in detail in my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. And in Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, you get that book on Amazon.com. I talk about why why these white supremacists went out to divide the Black man and the Black woman, and why the Black woman is single. It was all, again, social engineering meant to divide the Black community. And because the Black man was not able to be the provider that was presented, like by Madison Avenue in Hollywood, to its ideals, what happened is many real Black men were not seen as that ideal. And so the Black woman wanted a Black man to be like a white man, but the Black man can't be like a white man in a racist and gynocentric system, because they don't give him the same opportunities. And with your affirmative action being hijacked to give the Black woman the job the Black man was supposed to have, this is why many Black men were economically underemployed and unemployed. So they're sitting there. She's talking about why it was much more likely to be single. But the reason why so many Black men are single is, again, because the feminist movement came in and told the Black woman she could be a part of the welfare state, or she could get an affirmative action job. And as she was empowered economically, the Black man was emasculated, and he was not able to be in the role that God established for him, being the head and the leader. And that's what made it next to impossible for the Black man to go out here and have a relationship. Now, compound this with the welfare state and your child support system that penalizes Black men, and it becomes a next to impossible situation for a Black man to go out here and get married. I mean, your Black man, in many cases, he did want to get married, but it's hard for him to get married in this system, again, that punishes him for basically anything that he does. I mean, if there's many women out here, they know they can call 911 again and over a toilet seat, or if he ate the last bowl of Blueberry Crunch, and they know they can lock that man up. And again, that Black man fears that he will lose his freedom if he gets involved with this woman. And that is why so many Black men are single today. And and it's not because, again, men are these so-called players or whoremongers in some cases. A lot of it has to do with the system, again, punishing the Black man if he goes out here and gets married because she can file for divorce or call 911, and that black man could lose everything because one felony conviction can destroy a black man's life and destroy his chances of even being able to even eke out any sort of living. Now, the article goes on to say that your Asian people are least likely to be single, followed by whites and Hispanics. And I have to question those statistics because I'm seeing upticks in their divorce rates as well, due to most of these feminists being out here, not women. And a large feminist population is the reason why you have so many single men. Because, like I'm stating in my book, The Woman Crisis, is part of my thesis, your feminist is incompatible with a man. And the reason why your feminist is incompatible with a man is because a feminist is not a helpmeet to a man. No, a feminist is a helpmeet to the state. And her job is to do the work of the state. And the part of the work of the state is eliminating any male competition because she wants to be the head of the order. And being the head of the order allows her to have that power that she has. And that's part of what she wants to do. She wants to maintain her power base. So she does not want the man to be in a power position, because if the man is in a power position, then she fears that she will not be taken care of. The main reason why so many women are feminists, again, is due to fear and insecurity. They fear that they won't have any economic security that the state provides. And because they fear they won't have that security that the state provides, they don't trust men, and they don't want men coming into power positions because they don't trust those men to be their protectors or their providers. Because many of the women who took part of feminist culture, they bought into many of the lies that men would walk out on them, men would leave them, men would betray them. But this isn't the case at all. This is all a lot of fear that they have learned. And as they have learned these fears, they have just become exaggerated to the point where many of the women in our gynocentric system do not trust any sort of man in a leadership position outside of the handful that control their paychecks. So the outside of those handful of men, they don't trust any of the other men out here. And that's why so many women are having a hard time going out here and connecting with men, having relationships with them, or getting married. And again, all of this information was not featured in this Time magazine article by this woman who clearly did not do her research, because I'm going to read further on. She says most researchers agree that the trend lines showing that fewer people are getting married and that there are those who are doing increasingly better off financially have to do with wealth and education on marriage and vice versa. And I have to call BS on that. And this is a part of the article where I have to say that it's all about these women's fears of not being able to find a partner, because she goes on and talks about people who are financially stable are just more likely to find and attract a partner. Well, that's one of the things that they're afraid of these days, is a lot of these women are terrified as related to finding a man, because they're realizing they went out here and destroyed a lot of those young men back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And now there's no population of men for them to be able to find to marry. Autobot Jazzman asks a great question. What happens when the state starts to decline? Well, that's something I'm going to go in depth in The Woman Crisis in. But when the state starts to decline, they're not going to have anybody there to take care of them. And they're going to be in a really bad place, because the state needs taxes in order to be able to run. But if there are no men in society working, then they won't have anybody to go out here and be able to get the revenue to take care of them. I mean, they're thinking that they can go out here and have these empowered women out here and they'll be able to take care of this whole thing. But if you don't have any men going out here and doing work, then you don't have anybody to build anything. And if you don't have anybody to build and maintain anything, everything winds up falling apart. So that's what happens when you have a whole civilization where the state has the women dependent on the state because there's no men there. And again, you need men in order to build and maintain a civilization, and you need men to be in positions of power. But the state is believing, oh, we can have these women in empowered positions. But when you have women in empowered positions, you're going to have a decline because those men have no incentive to go out here and work anywhere, and they can't really get to work anywhere, and they can't go out here and build anything. And great as me, they don't mention those single men who don't go to college and go to trade school, but pull six figures. And the reason why they don't talk about those men is because most of these women, because they're hypergamous and they've bought into the Madison Avenue and Hollywood narratives, they want to get a Mr. Big, like they talked about in Sex and the City. That's their ideal. They don't want to talk about getting a guy who works in transit. They don't want to go out here and talk about getting an auto mechanic. No, they want to go and get a Mr. Big. They want a suit and tie corporate guy who they believe will allow them to elevate their social status, because women don't want men just because they have a certain kind. They don't want a certain kind of man, because a guy who's a mechanic, they cannot go out here and show him off to their friends. They can't impress people with and get social currency. And that's because females are social. They want a guy who they can go out here and show out. And they're looking for this millionaire kind of guy so they can say that they've got this big shot, and they want a Mr. Big. But Mr. Big, again, he's only in 20% of the men out here. And that's one of the things that has these women who wrote, like the one who wrote this Time magazine article, scared. They know that there aren't that many Mr. Bigs out there. And as they get older, they know that their chances of getting a Mr. Big are becoming slim to none. And Slim has left town. And that's the thing that has them scared as related to all of these single men, that they're realizing they passed up on a lot of guys. And now they're worrying, oh, there's nobody looking for them, because they've caught looking for this ideal, but they've passed so many real men, and they've oftentimes denied real men opportunities to grow. And what they don't understand is you could have had a Mr. Big if you sat there and worked with that guy when he was younger. And had you given that guy a chance to start his life when he was in his 20s, he in his 40s right now could be a six-figure guy, and he could be a guy making that kind of money. But you denied that guy a chance to get his start. And now many of these women are realizing that as their lives hit the finish line, they're going to wind up hitting the finish themselves and taking a fast track to the road to bust downtown. Now, as the article goes on, it says that it's not that marriage is making people richer than it used to. It's that marriage is becoming an increasingly elite institution. So people are increasingly only getting married if they have economic advantages. That's what a professor at the sociology of the University of Maryland says. Marriage does not make people change their social class, but it makes people change their race and those things that are very predictors of economic outcomes. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with a lot of this. The whole thing is that people used to make good money. I mean, guys, again, at the GM plant with a high school diploma were pulling six figures. Guys in transit were pulling six figures, and they still pull six figures right now. A lot of auto mechanics are pulling six figures, and it wasn't an elite institution. Many people married and they had a high middle class lifestyle. But the whole thing is, because we invested in our men, that's why we had men getting married, because men were out here making good money. They were looking to start families, and they were looking to go out here and build legacies, because that's what men used to do. They would go out here and build wealth. And part of building wealth is going out here and having not only the tangible assets, but having the heirs to maintain those assets. But if a man cannot get his life started, then he has no reason to get married. I mean, I myself was thinking about marriage many years ago, but because I could not get started with an entry-level job, I could not even consider even getting a girlfriend or even thinking about girlfriend. because I needed to get my money right. And that's something many, again, of the feminists and many others out here, they don't really understand. If the man can't get his life started, then he can't consider marriage because, yes, a woman can go out here and pick her boyfriend, but a man needs to be in an economic place of stability in order to think about getting a wife. A man has to have his money straight. Man has to have his economic house in order, and a man has to have his economic resources in place before he can go out here and start talking about even talking to women. That's something many, again, females don't understand, that's why we have to invest in the man first, because if the man can't get his money together and he can't get himself stable on a job, then he has no reason to go out here and get married to a woman because he's not in a place where he can take care of himself. So you have a man out here, and if he can't get himself to the place where he can move out of his parents' home, then how is he going to be able to go out here and talk about even talking about going on a date with a woman? That's a critical question that I'd like to ask the writer of this article. I mean, if this man cannot even get hired for a minimum wage job, then how is he going to be able to be seen as somebody who a woman would consider to be a viable partner? Many women don't understand that, again, you don't start out being Mr. Big. No, you start out small. And if a guy cannot start out small, then how is he going to come up? Another critical question that the writer of this article does not really understand. They're looking to get, again, a big corporate guy. But again, every corporate guy or any guy at all, he starts out in an entry-level job making maybe $20,000, $25,000 a year. Back in the 90s, I'd say about $30,000 or $40,000 right now. And a guy has to get started somewhere in order to go somewhere. But it seems like many females, they think that they're going to try to find this perfect guy in the beginning, but there is no perfect guy because, again, marriage, like the article says, doesn't make people change their social class, but they can't move up the ladder if they can't get to the first rung. And that's what's happening to many men out here. They can't get to the first rung because you have women who are the gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers are keeping those men from being able to climb the ladder because of their hypergamy. They're looking for guys to be already established with big degrees and big paper. But if that guy was established like that, why would he be coming and looking for an entry-level job? That's what many females don't really understand that create the HR brick wall. They don't really understand that the guy, he's not going to be established like that and looking for a job. And a lot of them are thinking that these guys are going to just pop up out of nowhere with Brooks Brothers suits. I mean, no, a guy is going to start out with a J.C. Penney or a Sears suit, and then he's going to move up to that level. But they're looking for that guy to come up to that level and be Mr. Brooks Brothers driving the luxury car in the beginning. But that guy is going to start out, again, in the J.C. Penney suit or the Sears suit, and he's going to be out here driving the hoopty. And that's how every guy out here starts. But you can't explain that to today's modern feminist because she has this, again, Madison Avenue and Hollywood idea of what a man is. And this fantasy construct has her thinking that your man is a certain way, but he's not that way at all. Now, the article goes on to talk about the reframing of the issue. It may explain why fewer men than women find partners, and even though men are likely looking for one. The economic pressures on men are stronger, and I'll agree with that. The pressures are very strong when you're younger because you have to go out here and try to find a way to get not only your life started, but you have to lay out the framework for how you are going to build and how you are going to be able to pay for everything you're going to build. So a guy who is 21 years old, like I was when I graduated college, it's a lot of pressure. You're looking to get started with your life. and you're looking to get your money together so you can get yourself together so you can go out here and do the things that you need to do. And as I'm talking about money, I'm going to ask everybody to, hit up the Cash app by clicking the link in the chat. So asking everybody to donate to the Cash app is greatly appreciated because it helps me be able to stay on the internet and be able to continue to be able to go out here and do great streams like this. So I'm asking everybody to donate to the Cash app by clicking the link in the chat. And I'm going to continue going on because, a lot of people really, again, they don't understand those pressures that a man has because you want to try to get your money really straight by the time you're about 23, 24, 25. And again, we have people in the job market saying, oh, he doesn't have a degree, he doesn't have experience, he doesn't have references. Well, I remember hearing from many guys in the 60s and the 70s and even the early 80s and even parts of the early 90s saying they would just come in someplace with a high school diploma, say, I want to work, and they had a job that same day. But today's job market, we want to have 1,000 references. We want 100 different degrees, and it makes it impossible for that man to start making those moves and start making those efforts to start building. I mean, back again, 50, 60 years ago, an 18-year-old guy could, again, high school diploma, even no high school diploma, could go out here and get his life started and be able to start making some money even in a factory or someplace like that. And again, make some very good money and be able to get his life started. And with that foundation, he could go out here and appear to be attractive to women because he would have things like that good, stable job. He would be having a new car because I've heard so many guys in the 60s and the 70s talking about how they were able to buy brand new Monte Carlo or brand new Grand Prix and get and even smaller cars. They would have a nice car. And again, this would make him look like an asset and his life is stable. Now, the article goes on to talk about some studies go as far to suggest the 30-year decrease in the rate of coupling can be largely attributed to global trade and the 30-year decrease in the number of stable and well-paying jobs. Yes, that is true. Because when we had stable, well-paying jobs, a man could appear attractive to a woman. But when you've got a lot of the women making more money than the man is not attractive to the woman. No, she's looking for the man to be in a financial place where he is financially stable. She's looking for that man to be able to make a living because that's part of his role of being a provider. And she's looking for that man to be in a place where he can be a head and a leader. So that's hard for a man to do when the woman has the jobs and has control over the economy. She does not respect those men as leaders or authority figures, and she does not see those men as capable of being providers because the state is providing for her and giving her security, so she doesn't trust any of the men to be secure. Now, the article goes on to talk about when manufacturing moved overseas, non-college educated men found it hard to make a living, thus more difficult to attract a partner and raise a family, which is very true. When a lot of men out here, those jobs left, those guys, they were no longer attractive to women, and women didn't want to get involved with those guys because they were not economically stable. So when you have, again, a lot of men out here and they can't find a way to make a living, and I can tell you as a college educated man, it's hard for even a college educated guy to make a living because, again, when you have females in charge, they don't respect any man unless he's already established. Now, the article goes on to say, but there is also evidence that coupling up includes economic fortunes of couples, both men and women. It's not that they only have to pay one rent and buy the fridge, but some sociologists study marriage saying that the partner, I have to say BS to that because this is all about, again, the females feeling scared because they can't find that partner. And the reason why they're coupling up is because they some of them just want to pay the bills. But most men can't couple up these days because of the Me Too movement, the divorce rates and stuff like that. They can't couple up. And that's, again, another reason why they just don't come together. Now, they also talk about there's a way in which marriage makes men more responsible, and makes them better workers. But if you don't give that man that first job, then he has no incentive to be more responsible or be a better worker. And if you don't give that man that first job to get started, then he has no incentive to go out here and build anything. And the Harvard study says that more men are more likely to leave a job before finding another. But a lot of those men are not leaving those jobs willfully. I know from my experience, a lot of females, what they're doing these days is getting these men fired. And what they're doing is stuff to get that guy out of a job because they want to create their own gynocentric workplace because they fear male competition. So that's a part of the article that I have a serious disagreement with. Glad to see Truth the Revelator. I'm talking about this Time Magazine article, which talks about why so many men are single than before, and they're sitting there again talking about how married men are out here and they're better workers. And I again, what's a man have an incentive to work for if he's going to get fired? I mean, in today's job market, men are not leaving their jobs. What's happening is the men are getting fired, and they're getting fired because a lot of the females, what they do is try to set the guy up for termination because they fear male competition. And because they fear male competition being better at their jobs, they try to get these men out of the jobs because they know that men work longer hours. Now, there's a Pew report that says that, married men work longer hours. No, single men work even longer hours than married men because they're trying to climb the ladder so they can have an incentive to get married. And those men, again, they are undercut by a lot of these feminists, and because the feminists do not like male competition because they know that they can't compete against male competition. And the article goes on to talk about there's also evidence that the decline in marriage is not also just about being wealthy enough to afford it. Since 1990, women have graduated college in far higher numbers than men. But the whole thing is, it's the man who has to pay for the engagement ring. And if the man isn't working, then he can't pay for the engagement ring. That's something that many women can't connect the dots on. And it's not about being wealthy. The whole thing is, if the man can't get his start in the job market and he's constantly cut down by feminists who are trying to get him fired, how can he go out here and rise up the ranks to be able to make enough money to afford a ring that costs 2 months' salary? How can a man get to a point where he can have enough money to afford to propose if you're always cutting him off at the knees? That's another critical question I would like to ask the writer of this article, because it's not about how many women graduate college. It's about men being denied opportunities at the beginning of the line. And that's why your men are single and are not interested in marriage, because they have no economic incentive to marriage. Now, the article goes on to talk about the BA versus non-BA gap has grown tremendously on lots of things, in terms of incomes, in terms of marital status, in terms of cultural makers and tastes. It's become a sharper decimation over time. And I think that's part of why we see that in regard to marriage. If you want to lock yourself in a room with somebody for 50 years, you might want to have the same level of education and just have more in common with them. Well, that's partially true that people do get married because they have things in common. But the whole thing is that women, in a lot of cases, want to get with these, what they Madison Avenue in Hollywood have, these ideals of guys. And that man can't be that ideal because nobody wants to see that man rise. No, they want that man already prepackaged. And the whole thing is that guy, they don't want to go out here and do the work and help that guy work towards becoming that guy. They don't understand that you're not going to get a guy out the box brand new like this. No, you're going to have to work with that man towards building him up, because that's what helpmeets do. They help meet the goals of the man in doing God's work. But if a man with a feminist, she doesn't want to help a man. She wants to destroy a man because she hates men. And again, she's out here thinking she's strong and independent because she's got her degree and the state is taking care of her. So she's thinking she does not need a man, but a man is somebody that she was created for. and that's why she's dissatisfied with her life. Now, the article goes on to talk about you get women who are liberal, having gone to college, and men who are relatively conservative, still living in a working class world, and can create the kind of political and cultural divide that makes it harder for people to connect romantically as well. Well, what you're seeing here is something I talk about in The Woman Crisis, about the incompatibility with men, because your feminist is incompatible with a man, and it is next to impossible for a man to connect with a feminist because she's out here, she's got her education and her degrees, and a man was created by God to be his head and his steward. Now, the woman is a head that the state has created, and that's why your woman is not somebody that a man wants to deal with, because she wants to be the head of the state's order, but a man's looking for a helpmeet to be the partner that helps him do God's work. That's why things are not working. It's not a political or a cultural divide. It is a spiritual divide, and it's a spiritual divide that prevents your woman from connecting with a man in a relationship. Now, the article goes on to conclude that says, what seems to be clear is the path to marriage increasingly runs through college. And I'm going to have to say, no, the path to marriage runs through the Most High living God, because marriage is an institution established by the Most High. And the reason why your woman is not capable of getting married is because she is a feminist, and a feminist does not follow God's order. Your feminist does not have faith in God to have the man he created as her head to provide for her, and she's looking for the state to provide for her, and she's chasing this ideal of a guy, and because she's chasing this ideal of a guy, that's why she's not able to find a husband. Now, the article goes on to talk about, while the figures of single men declining economic fortunes are most sobering, they are not surprised to what the authors the most. It's quite startling how the much partnered women have outpaced single women, and almost 43% of partnered women have completed a bachelor's degree compared to a third of single women. And this whole article, again, is just talking about degrees, but it's not about degrees. The whole thing is, your female with a degree, she does not trust in the Most High, and that's why she's single. She's out here looking for the state to take care of her, and the state is these corporations and government to take care of her. But the whole thing is, if the state is taking care of her, then why does she need a husband? That's a critical question many people really don't want to ask, because the answer is right there. I mean, when I look at this article, again, talking about single men, again, how can a man marry a woman if she's got this degree and this job? I mean, if the state is taking care of her, how can a man go out here and be the head of his household? How can he be a steward? How can he do God's work if the woman is working against him and working to be a part of the state? Now, when I look at this article, and as I've deconstructed, she's talking about men are more likely to be single than women, but there's a reason why so many men are single, and it has to do with the way our society is structured. Again, in our society, we do not invest in our men. We do not go out here and help them work towards getting a start in life. No, we want to go out here and empower the women, but then we want to sit there and wonder why these men are out here and they're not out here and able to do the things that women expect them to do. I mean, if you don't go out here and support your men when they're young, how can they go out here and be the successes when they're older? That's another, again, critical question that the writer of this article really did not go into, because she was looking at this whole subject from an extremely gynocentric perspective. And because she was looking at this whole subject from a gynocentric perspective, she didn't really understand the struggles that men go through, struggles that I go into detail in my book, The Man Crisis. And this whole Time Magazine article is written from an extremely gynocentric perspective, and it talks about things from a woman's perspective as related to men being single. And again, there's a lot of fear that these women have about being single, because they know that they cannot find any sort of man to be that provider or to be that protector or to be a husband. But the reason why you don't have men out here who are capable of doing that is that we don't invest in our men. And if you don't invest in your men, they cannot come up to become the successes that you say that you want. I mean, if you want guys out here that are going to make the big money, you have to start investing in those men when they are 18, 19, 20, 21 in their high school and college years, because when that in that time, these guys are starting to lay the foundations for their adult lives. And as they're laying the foundation for their adult lives, they are out here building their savings. They're out here looking to get that down payment on an apartment. They are looking to start that, looking for that money to buy that car. And again, these guys are not going to start out in the Brooks Brothers suit or the Brooks Brothers shirt at 19, 20, 21. No, they're going to start out in, again, having maybe one JCPenney suit or a suit from Burlington Coat Factory like I had in 94 and they're going to start out like that, but over time they are going to come up. And again, women don't want to invest time in helping a man when he's at the bottom. They want this guy to come out at the top already established, but everybody's got to start out somewhere. I mean, when I started doing books, I wasn't starting out designing these books like I do today, like your Stop Simpins and Cyberspaces and Cancel Vacations. No, I was doing hand-drawn book covers. And again, everybody's got to start somewhere. And that's the problem that a lot of women have about today's man, not understanding today's man has to start someplace. And they want the guy, they're wondering, oh, why can't I get married? Well, when you start out in a marriage, you're going to start out with a guy at the bottom, and you're going to be working with that guy towards the way he's going to get up when he's older. But a lot of women don't want to sit there and grow with a man. They want, again, the man to become out established, making big paper, and they want the man to be this big time success from day one. But a guy is not going to come out starting out making big paper from day one. In the beginning, he's got to start somewhere, but many women don't want to support the guy as he's starting. And again, we're not talking about taking care of a man as related to financially. We're talking about helping this man out emotionally, because part of the help meets the role is to help the man, by encouraging him, providing him with emotional support, and, just standing by that man. And I find it interesting that you'll have females, they'll stand by a Pookie or a Ray Ray, but a guy who comes out of high school, a guy who comes out of college, he doesn't get that kind of support early on. And most people, they ignore that guy, and they don't really want to work with that guy towards building. No, they want the flashy guy who makes a lot of noise, not understanding that if you're going to go out here and work with a man, you have to work with the substance. And again, your guys out here, they're single today. And again, this article really does not go into detail to why so many men are single. And again, a lot of you guys, they're single because they don't get support from women. They don't get any help from women. They don't meet their needs. It's just all about them. And when I looked at this article, which said more men are more likely to be single than women, they really did not go and study this from the male perspective. And if I were asked to be a part of that article, I would have given this writer a completely different perspective, because had this woman read The Man Crisis or read one of my books like Stop Simping in Cyberspace or Stop Simping in the Workplace, you would get a more objective article which presents things from a far more objective perspective. And it's articles like this that say, oh, men are more likely to be single. Again, coming from a gynocentric perspective, it is more majority women that are single. And those women are single primarily because they are following this feminist doctrine. And because they're following this feminist doctrine, they are not women who can be helpmeets to men. No, they are helping the state, and they are helping the state, which is keeping them single into their old age because they're chasing a whole lot of unrealistic criteria as related to men. They're looking for this established guy, this Mr. Big from Sex and the City, this Ross from Friends, or one of these other guys who's already got his paper together. They're not understanding, again, if you want a guy out here, you're going to have to work with him when he's at that entry level, and you're going to have to work with him towards helping him build whatever he's going to build, whether it be advancing at that job or going to start his business. That is how you help the man in the beginning. And as you help that man in the beginning, he will move things forward. Polite Spectre left a super chat. Says a competent black man is tantamount to being autistic. Well, that's what some people want to see. But a competent black man is very important to a society, to a black community, because when you have competent black men, they can go out here and take care of business. But we don't value our competent black men. We don't value the kind of men out here. And because we don't invest in our men, that's why everything is messed up. Men don't want to be single. I know that a lot of men do want to get married. A lot of men did want to have relationships, but they can't have a relationship with a feminist because a feminist is not a woman. A feminist is female and has female anatomy, but she has a mindset that thinks that it's a man. And because she has a mindset that thinks that she's a man, it makes it where it's impossible for the man to connect with her, and makes it where it's impossible for the man to be able to form a relationship with her. So when you're dealing with a feminist, everything is about her having this power and control because she fears that she can't trust a man. And again, because she knows she's outside of God's order, she needs this chaos to be able to maintain her control. So this is why your American and Western man is single, because he cannot find a woman to be a helpmeet, and he's looking for that woman to be that helpmeet. But you cannot find your help met by a feminist, because a feminist is looking to be a helpmeet to the state, and she's looking to submit only to the order of the state, because the state provides her with economic security, and because the state provides her with economic security, it makes it where she has no faith in the man that God provided for her. And she doesn't want, again, trust the man because of that fear. And this is why your American man is single. Your American man, in many cases, wants to get married, but the thing that's keeping the American man from the American woman is the state and her whole devotion and loyalty to the state, which she deifies and worships more than the man. So these are all points that I'm putting in my upcoming book, The Woman Crisis, which is the companion to The Man Crisis. And I'm hoping to get that book out sometime in 2022. And I look at today at this Time magazine article, and again, the real problem is not the man. The problem is that we have females who just are in these corporate positions, working for the state as gatekeepers and denying men the ability to go out here and actualize their potential. And if we had some effort to invest in these men and started putting more money in their pockets, these men would appear to be more attractive to women, and we would see more men out here in relationships, more men getting married, more men starting families. And again, it's all about us investing in our men. And if we invested in our men, we would have a society not of single men and single women, but men and women starting families. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. And I'm asking everybody to donate to the Cash App by clicking the link in the chat. That helps me be able to stay on the air and be able to do more streams like this. And I'm asking everybody to pick up books like The Man Crisis and Stop Simping in cyberspace. We have 80 people in the chat. So we have 53 likes. Let's get those likes up to 60 or 75. So I'm asking everybody to hit those likes because that helps with the algorithm. I mean, 80 people in the room. So I'm asking them to do that. I'm also asking people to, again, pick up these Men's Issues books, Man Crisis and Stop Simping in Cyberspace. I'm asking people to pick up E-Steam Cancelification, and ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, and John Hayes Taking Care of Business. All books as part of the SJS Direct 2021 catalog. So I'm asking it and also to pick up Eternal Night, my horror novel. Lots of great books on the SJS Direct imprint. So I'm asking everybody to pick up some of those books. And that also helps with things as related to the SJS Direct imprint. And it also helps get the sales up over there. So I'm asking everybody to pick up some of those books this weekend. I'm working for some weekend book sales. So I'm asking everybody to come out and pick up some books. So I'm hoping everybody learned something from tonight's stream. And I'm hoping you got a male perspective on this article written by this woman that gives you a better understanding of things. And I'm hoping that you'll be there for next week's stream. And I want to thank everybody again for coming to this week's stream. And I want to thank everybody again. And I hope you'll be there for next week's stream, where I'll probably be talking about another men's issues topic. So I want to thank everybody for coming to the stream. Everybody have a good night, and everybody have a great weekend.